So that's, so now I want to finish up talking about, let's see, I have about 15 more minutes, is that correct? 15 more minutes? Okay, I'm not sure. I think I started at 2:20. So a lot of my work recently has been creating social investing funds with the idea that, you know, if you want to change the competitive landscape in an industry, how do you use the criteria by which funds are invested and which companies you choose to invest to tilt a whole field in the direction of affordability and benefit for the consumer. And of course, most companies, when they appeal to investors, it's all about the return that the investor is going to get. And so we try and have reasonable economic return, but we add in social return, social impact. So I'll talk about a few of the financial instruments that I've developed and some of the unique aspects. So the first fund that I developed was with Deutsche Bank, and I did this work actually within Ashoka. I'm an Ashoka fellow, but I also work there and do some of my projects out of Ashoka, mainly the social investing ones. And it's a very good environment because of all the contacts that Ashoka has. So this fund was a collaboration of Deutsche Bank, Ashoka, and the International Agency for Prevention of Blindness, which is a large consortium of eye care organizations. And we put together a $15 million fund that provides affordable loans to eye care programs that are already self-financing but need money to scale. And so the way we put together this fund is that we convinced Deutsche Bank and a few other investors to put in about $1.5 million where that money was willing to take the loss up to $1.5 million. So that's what I call first loss cushion money. So, so with that credit enhancement or risk reducing aspect, it made it easier to bring in other more commercially minded investors. So on top of the first loss cushion investors, we brought in an investor. Actually, he's the founder of E-Trade. It's a big internet trading company. He was born blind with congenital cataract before they did surgery on congenital cataract. So he was quite interested in this fund. And he put in $500,000 to be the second loss cushion at 2% return. And that made it very interesting. There was enough risk reduction to make it attractive to the US government overseas private investment corporation. And also to the French government. So they came in. And on top of that, the largest financial services and insurance company in Norway thought, this investment has social impact, but we can be very well protected by all these other investors below us who are going to take the hit on any losses up to our amount. And so it looks like our normal investment where we'll get 5% return and it's relatively low risk. So the idea here is that when you're talking about creating social investing funds, you want it to look as normal or vanilla as possible. Like how do you make it look like a regular fund to big groups like pension funds or governments or financial services companies? Because that's where all the money comes from for investing anyway. At least in the United States, a lot of it comes from pension funds. So how do you create risk-reducing attributes that make it look normal to groups like pension funds? Okay. So then I'm also now developing a health fund. This is with support from Oxford University and the George Institute in Australia. And we're aiming to create, a $50 to $100 million fund that invests in companies making health technology affordable. whether it's medical devices, diagnostics, or pharmaceuticals. And so this is, and we're partnering with a group called Responsibility in Switzerland as the fund manager. And so we've assembled a very good team to work with. And actually one of my fund managers used to manage a large, well, he's just now finishing up managing a large fund for SoftBank, SoftBank Japan. He does all their health investing. So I have a very good fund manager that has a lot of background in health, a lot of it gained through his work with SoftBank. So again, you know, we're looking for companies that can be transformative in their space. Like, how do you invest in companies that change the whole paradigm? So here's some of the companies that we're looking at, and I'll just mention some of them. There's Ageria. They're making a very novel tissue adhesive, and we're working to help them create like a joint venture with Oralab, so that they can have all wound closure products under one roof and be globally competitive with companies like Ethicon, where we drive the price down. One of my colleagues that helped me develop this fund worked with Dr. Reddy's lab in India to develop a poly pill. It's a mixture of all the drugs that they give people who've had heart attacks, but instead of 4 or 5 pills costing, you know, $10 or $20 a day, they have it all in one pill that costs pennies a day. And that same pill, we just completed major clinical trials which demonstrate that pill also reduces the risk of heart attack and stroke and some cancers by 50%. So that's one of the drugs that we're looking at. If you look at down this list, we're working on a stethoscope that can actually detect and measure coronary artery disease. So instead of having a stress test or an angiogram, you can have a $250 stethoscope with algorithms to detect the same thing. And, you know, instead of paying $5,000 to have an angiogram. So these are some of the investments that we're looking at, and a lot of it is focusing on chronic disease, because if you look at what people are dying from, most people who dying in developing countries are dying from cardiovascular disease. The whole demographic is changing from infectious diseases to chronic diseases like heart attack, stroke, diabetes. So these are just some of the ideas for creating funds. You need to look at the risk and return for each investment, and then you need to aggregate that risk and return into one investing pool. And then you need to, as you talk to each investor, you have to figure out what is their risk and return expectation, and how do they fit into the fund, so that different investors will assume different levels of risk and expect a different level of return from other investors. And the idea here is that how do you use first loss cushion money from governments or development agencies that where you're leveraging commercial capital. So the whole idea is how do you bring in enough ways to reduce risk that a fund looks normal to commercial capital, that it doesn't look like it's some exotic financial instrument, because in fact that's what it is. It's somewhat exotic because, you know, in order to create the asset class of social enterprise, you need to have investing instruments, but in order to get people to invest in those instruments, they have to look kind of normal. So that's the key insight that we're trying to apply to this field of social investing. How do you use credit enhancements like first loss cushions or guarantees from banks that you purchase, or technical assistance funds? All these things can be factored in as risk-reducing attributes to the fund so that it gives it the right risk-return profile for commercial investors.